Good morning,
Good
church
morning.
family. As the opening prayer today, I'd like to offer this Aztec prayer. Oh, only for a short while, you have loaded us to each other, because we take form in your act of drawing us, and we take life in your painting us, and we breathe in your singing us. But only for a short while, you have loaded us with each other, because you have drawing cut an obsidian fades, and the green feathers, the crown feathers of the kazoo bird lose their color, and even the sounds of the waterfall die out in the dry season. So we too, because only for a short while have you loaded us with each other.
My name is Cesaro Napolez. Many of you might know my family, but what you may not know that Lucia, Lupita, and I descend from the Yaqui people. The Yaqui are an indigenous people in the valley of Rio Yaqui in the Mexico state of Sonora and the southwestern United States. The Pasco Yaqui tribe, based in Tucson, Arizona, is the only federally recognized Yaqui tribe in the United States. Though the Yaqui people lived elsewhere in the United States, especially California, Arizona, and Nevada, today I will be sharing a poem by Yaqui poet Anita Indres. A reporter said that my last book didn't have a poem about Indians. It only had a poem about love and loss, life and the combination of spirit and matter. You know, those things Indians aren't supposed to think about, he said. I didn't sound Indian over the phone. What does an Indian sound like? In Mayan, fruit was the tree's eyes. A door was the mouth of a house. Thumbs were the mother of the hands. There was once 2,000 separate languages spoken. Aztecs call themselves people who explain themselves and can speak clearly. We are still those people. We may speak English or Spanish or Hupa or Navajo, Apache, Yaqui, Cree, Afaro, Hindas, Dakota, French, Salish, Miwok, Modoc, Inuit, Nootka, Nahuatl, Pomo, Kumashan, or Mohawk. The old languages use metaphors. A small slippery fish was named in the chant for an easy birth. Words created the experience, like this poem, like the colored threads in Kay's fingered to tell stories. A teacher at Lewis and Clark High School told me that I didn't look like an Indian. What's an Indian look like? Squat, he said, short and ugly. A tow truck driver refused to take me, my 3-year-old son, my 80-year-old grandmother to the shop after my car broke down. Indian smell, he said. I begged him until he grunted okay, and we climbed in. I sat quiet, ashamed that I was quiet when I wanted to put my mother of my hands in his eyes and curse him with worms in 2,000 languages. I'm short and sometimes squat. I can get real ugly. I use my words like arrows. I'm a small slippery fish that gives birth to poems. This is a poem about Indians that's not about Indians after all. It's about something else. You figure it out.
Today, this is my prayer for our community. As we approach the table together and as we walk out into our larger community, may we walk in beauty. In beauty may I walk. In beauty may I walk. All day long may I walk. Through returning seasons may I walk. On the trail marked with pollen may I walk. With grasshoppers about my feet may I walk. With dew about my feet may I walk. With beauty may I walk. With beauty behind me may I walk. With beauty above me may I walk. With beauty below me may I walk. With beauty all around me may I walk. In old age wandering on a trail of beauty, lively may I walk. In old age wandering on a trail of beauty, living may I walk. It is finished in beauty, it is finished in beauty.
Good morning. I've been asked to read a poem that I had written. This was back in early 90s when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. And it was back during the days of this little shabby chic cafe a bunch of us hung out at. And there was a freak rainstorm that knocked out the power. So this is what I got from the experience. when the lights went out at Jane's. Others may have preferred to sit and curse the darkness, but not those at Jane's, drinking the sweet, warm fellowship as the parched hills drank the rain that night, punctuated by the dancing of the lights and shadows across the cabbage roses and lipstick-marked cappuccino cups, stretching from antique candlesticks, soft laughings of fuzzy pears and small Midwestern towns, and hushed portions of our lives meandered among the paintings and the flower baskets under the watchful eyes of the terracotta rabbit. Then the rain gave way to the mist, and Edison's creations shone forth again, underscored by the resurrected white noise as our breath hushed the flames.
So today we're talking about poetry, as you know, and a few weeks ago when Marcella and I sat down and we began to talk about this series, she said, "What are you going to preach on when we talk about poetry?" And I said, "I don't know, probably some poetry in the Bible." She said, that sounds good. I said, "I'll probably preach on the Psalms." And she said, "Don't preach on the Psalms, that's boring." She said, "Preach on the Song of Solomon. That's much more interesting." And I said, "You know what? You're right. I mean, we have at least a passing familiarity with the Psalms. Some of us turn to the Psalms whenever we want some comfort, although not all the Psalms are comforting. But we have some familiarity with the Psalms, but the Song of Solomon, the Song of Songs, the Canticle of Canticles, is a little bit less familiar, I suspect. But I know that Tim and the Learning Collaborative talked about the Song of Songs within the last couple of months. And so perhaps if any of you attended that, it is fresh on your mind. And I thought, let's talk about the Song of Songs today. But here's the thing. If you were reading through the Bible and you came across the Song of Songs and you started to read it, you might say, what on earth is this doing in the Bible? Why is this even in here? And so I thought to help us answer that question and understand the Song of Songs a little bit more clearly, we'd watch just a little short video. Let's see that, Matt.
The Song of Songs. It's a well-known but not so well understood book of the Bible. It's 8 chapters of love poetry. And while there is an introduction and a conclusion, the book doesn't have any kind of rigid literary design, and that's because it's a collection of poems. They're not meant to be dissected or taken apart. They're meant to be read as a flowing whole and simply enjoyed. The first line of the book tells us that it's the Song of Songs, which is a Hebrew idiom like the Holy of Holies or the King of Kings. It's a Hebrew way of saying the greatest thing. So this is the greatest song of all songs. Then we're told in the first line that this Song of Songs is of Solomon, which could mean that he is the author. His name does begin the book, after all. But as you read the poems, you discover that the main voice is that of a woman called the Beloved. And while there is also a male voice, it does not seem to be Solomon's. Solomon is mentioned a couple times in the poems, but he's never a speaker. And you do have to admit, Solomon is a very odd candidate as the author of this book, given the fact that he had 700 wives. For the lovers in the Song of Songs, they are the only ones in the world for each other. So the of Solomon likely means in the wisdom tradition of Solomon. He was known for his wisdom, his poetry, his love of learning about every part of life. And Solomon became the father of wisdom literature in Israel. And so his legacy is here carried on through a collection of love poems that explores the human experience of love and sexual desire. The opening poem introduces us to the basic theme of this book. We hear the voice of the young woman who delights in her man, a shepherd. Now, she's not married to him yet, but it becomes clear that they're engaged and they cannot wait to be together. From the introduction, the poems flow back and forth from the woman's voice to the man's, shifting from scene to scene without any kind of clear linear sequence or storyline. The poems move in these symphonic cycles, and key images and ideas get repeated and developed. So, one of the basic themes uniting the poems is the intense desire that this couple has for each other, expressed through their constant seeking and finding. So, after the opening poem, they're separated but on the hunt for one another. So the woman calls out, or she'll wake up from a dream or go looking for her lover, and more than once they'll find each other, they'll embrace, and then right when things start to get a bit racy, the scene will suddenly end and a new one will start. They're separated, looking for each other, and on it goes. Another repeated theme is the joy of the couple's physical attraction for one another. So multiple times they'll pause and describe each other with these elaborate metaphors. And here it's very helpful to know that these images and metaphors in Hebrew poetry are not primarily visual. If you try and paint a picture of these people based on the metaphors, you will end up with something that looks very, very strange. What you're supposed to do is reflect on the meaning of these images as they relate to the man and the woman. So you'll read through the poetic cycles, and the tension will keep building in their desire and joy and attraction. And this spiraling repetition is a poetic way of heightening and focusing on the mystery and power of sexual love. It all comes together in the conclusion, which pauses to summarize what these poems are all about. Love is as strong as death. Its passions are as severe as the grave. Its flashes are of fire, a divine flame. Many waters cannot extinguish love. Rivers cannot sweep it away. If one were to give all the wealth of one's house for love, he would be utterly scorned. The poem highlights the power and the intensity of love, how it's both beautiful but also dangerous. Like fire, love can destroy people if it's abused, or be life-giving if it's protected. Ultimately, love expresses the insatiable human longing to know and be fully known and desired by another. Love is one of the most transcendent and mysterious experiences in human life, and as a part of the Bible's wisdom tradition, this book says it's a gift from God. After this, there's an odd poem about Solomon trying to do what the previous poem just said was impossible, to buy love. The woman rejects Solomon's offer, and then the book concludes with the man and the woman. They're separate once more on the hunt for each other. He calls to hear her voice. She begs him to run away with her, and that's how the book ends. Just totally open-ended. But that's a lot like love, which never truly concludes, because there's always more to discover and pursue in your beloved. And so true love has no end, and neither does this book. Now, through history, the big question raised by the Song of Songs is, what on earth is love poetry doing in the Bible? There have been three main interpretations of this book throughout history. In Jewish tradition, it's been read as an allegory, each character a symbol. So the woman is Israel, the man is God, and their love is a symbol of the covenant between God and Israel made at Mount Sinai and the giving of the Torah. This view flowed into the Christian tradition, but the characters were swapped. So it's about Christ's love for his people, the church. And this interpretation was inspired by Paul's words in Ephesians 5, that a Christian husband's love for his wife is a symbol of Christ's love for the church. What's interesting is that in the last 100 years, archaeological discoveries among Israel's ancient neighbors in Egypt and Babylon has turned up all kinds of ancient love poetry that's very similar in language and imagery to the Song of Songs. We see that love poetry was a meaningful part of Israel's cultural environment, which has led most scholars today to view the Song of Songs as what it presents itself to be, an arrangement of Israelite love poetry reflecting on the divine gift of love. But that doesn't mean that it's only ancient love poetry. There's a key feature of these poems that sticks out when you read them as a part of the Old Testament, and that's the overwhelming use of garden imagery. There are powerful echoes of the Garden of Eden and the idyllic scene between the married couple in the early chapters of Genesis. So the image of the man and the woman naked and vulnerable, but completely unified and safe with one another. This resonates in the background of the Song of Songs. It's as if in these poems we are witnessing the love of a couple whose relationship is untainted by selfishness and sin. And so ultimately the song holds out hope. That even though our own relationships are so often distorted by selfishness, love is a transcendent gift, and it's meant to point us to something greater, to the gift of God's love that will one day permeate and transform His beloved world. And that's what the Song of Songs is all about.
So there you go, one person chasing another, an indecent proposal, coming back together and hoping for love. I don't often show such long videos and sermons, but I love this because I think that this is kind of confusing for folks. And I thought this was a very succinct way of understanding the Song of Songs. And I think that the general thesis that they present is 100% right. You've got erotic love poetry in the Bible. That's what this is. It's consistent with love poetry that we find in the ancient Near East. And here's the thing. I think it becomes problematic if we want to try to make that into a metaphor. That's what we often try to do if we get uncomfortable with something, right? We want to make it into a metaphor. And the church has had trouble speaking about physical love. That's been something that has been taboo in churches. And so we want to make it a metaphor. And I think by doing that, we have really done some great harm. So if you're talking about kind of erotic love poetry, I think it becomes problematic if you try to make it into a metaphor of God embracing God's people, or Christ embracing the church. I don't think that really works very well, even though that's what theologians have wanted to do. I think it is 100% right to see that love, in its form of romantic relationships, is a gift from God. That whenever we are in relationships where the power dynamics are equal, where it is consensual, and where we practice putting one another first, that is a great gift. You know, whenever I do a wedding, I always tell the couple that love, when it is at its best, is a continual growing experience for all of us. And it is one of the greatest gifts that God can give to us, because we get to practice loving one another each and every day, and that is hard, and it is beautiful, and it is sometimes not beautiful, and sometimes it is life-giving and wonderful. It is an incredible gift whenever love is at its best. And it is a gift from God, recognizing that, of course, not all relationships are like that. I love the Song of Songs because it helps us to recognize that the love we experience in community, agape love, is from God. The romantic love we experience, eros in Greek, is a gift from God. That love is a way of experiencing true care for one another and God in our lives. Now, queer theologians would remind us, queer theology is a branch of theology that reminds us to look at LGBTQ plus issues. Queer theology would remind us that while this is a heteronormative poem, that's to be expected in the ancient Near East, but that we would look at other examples throughout the Bible to show us that while love is a gift of God, it does not have to be in this one particular form. They would point us to David and Jonathan's relationship. They would point us to the relationship of Naomi and Ruth. They would point us to people who defied gender norms, like eunuchs, who didn't fit neatly into one gender or the other. And I think the lesson from that is that romantic love is a gift from God, but it does not have to be the type of romantic love that is described in this particular poem. Now, the video also made one other argument, and I'm going to take their advice. I'm often not good at taking advice. I don't take advice very often, but I'm going to take the advice of the video, and I'm not going to overanalyze the poetry. The thing they said was, we should just let it wash over us. Just listen to it. And so we've done something a little bit different today. We usually hear the scripture lesson, and then I talk about it. But I thought we might appreciate the message of the Song of Songs a little bit more if we understood why it was in there and what it was doing before we heard it. So I want to today share with you a little bit from the Song of Songs. I'm going to share the opening line, a few verses from chapter 2, all of chapter 6, and the final verse of the book. And there isn't any real logical reason that I chose chapter 6, other than there is a phrase in it, I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. And that is significant to me because Shauna and I had that read at our wedding. And we have that phrase inscribed in Hebrew in our wedding rings. This is the Song of Songs. The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. The voice of my beloved. Look, he comes leaping upon the mountains, bounding over the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Look, there he stands behind our wall, gazing in the windows, looking through the lattice. My beloved speaks and says to me, arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. For now the winter is past, the rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth. The time of singing has come. The voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree puts forth its figs, and the vines are in blossom. They give forth fragrance. Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. Where is your beloved gone, O fairest among women? Which way has your beloved turned, that we may seek him with you? My beloved is gone down to the garden, to the beds of spices, to pasture his flock in the gardens, to gather lilies. Remember the idyllic nature of the garden? I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine. He pastures his flock among the lilies. You are beautiful as Tirzah, my love, comely as Jerusalem, terrible as an army with banners. Turn away your eyes from me, for they overwhelm me. Your hair is like a flock of goats moving down the slopes of Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of ewes that have come up from the washing. All of them bear twins, and not one among them is bereaved. Your cheeks are like halves of a pomegranate behind your veil. There are 60 queens, and there are 80 concubines. There are maidens without number. But my dove, my perfect one, is the only one. The darling of her mother, flawless to her that bore her. The maidens saw her and called her happy. The queens and concubines also, and they praised her. Who is that looks forth like the dawn, fair as the moon, bright as the sun, terrible as an army with banners? I went down to the nut orchard to look at the blossoms in the valley, to see whether the vines had budded, whether the pomegranates were in bloom. Before I was aware, my fancy set me in a chariot beside my prince. Return, return, O Shulamite, return, return, that we may look upon you. Why should you look upon the Shulamite as upon a dance before two armies? O you who dwell in the gardens, my companions are listening for your voice. Let me hear it. Make haste, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag upon the mountains of spices. And thanks be to God for the gift of love. Amen.